An interview with a former Tottenham legend reveals some of the huge players that Daniel Levy decided against signing during his time at Tottenham. Meanwhile, an ex-Spurs striker talks about why Dominic Solanke will be Big Ange Postecoglou's most important player this season, and the rumour mill ramps up again as Man United look for a new Spanish winger and Manchester City look at potentially bringing in one of the world's most exciting young players on a free transfer. All this and more on today's Daily Premier League News with me, Barnaby Slater. As ever, guys, thank you so much for watching and for listening. Please do press that like button. Also, do subscribe. If you're not already a subscriber, I bring you daily Premier League content, always starting with my beloved Tottenham Hotspur. And you can become a member. Support me making this daily content for you. Just £1 a month. All the details of how to be a member in the description box below. Thank you so much to all of my members and supporters so far. But let's get started, as I mentioned, at Tottenham. And just a little bit of news for those of us who've forgotten, actually. Christian Romero will definitely miss Tottenham's opening Europa League game against Qarabag this month. And that is a result of his red card from, wait for it, 2 seasons ago against AC Milan in the Champions League. UEFA, don't forget. I did forget, but another opportunity for Radu Dragusin to come in, and this will be one of his first opportunities to play alongside Mickey van der Ven, because most of the time, if my memory serves anyway, when Dragusin has started, he has played alongside Christian Romero instead of Mickey van der Ven. So it'll be interesting to see how those two play together. Also, former Tottenham striker Teddy Sheringham, he has come out and done an interview and says how he thinks Dominic Solanke will be Big Ange Postecoglou's most important player this season. For those of you too young to remember, do look up Teddy Sheringham. Check out some of his goals for Spurs, for England, for Manchester United. He really was just a brilliant... He was like a proper number 10 or /9/10 back in the days where they only ever played 2 up front. He was a real link man. He was good in the air as well, though. Brilliant hold-up play. But also, he was just a fantastic passer, had incredible vision. The cliche always went, the first 2 yards were in Teddy Sheringham's head because he was not a quick player, but he was a brilliant thinker on the pitch and just an unbelievable finisher as well. Can really recommend digging out a header he scored for Spurs at White Hart Lane against Newcastle, where he's kind of put through, and instead of kind of taking a touchdown, he sees the keeper off his line and heads it over him. Incredible finish. Anyway, Teddy says the following. He knows a bit about strikers. He says the following about Solanke. I think Dominic Solanke will be Tottenham's most important player this season. He's the man that Ange and the club have placed a lot of faith in to add the finishing touch to the team. There's an expectation that he'll score the goals we need and will be the difference maker in games that are tight. He's joined for a large fee, and that adds a certain amount of pressure. He's also making a step up in his playing level. With Tottenham playing in Europe this season, it's going to be a tough season. There'll be a lot of games, and managing that churn of Thursday and Sunday football successfully in terms of winning games will be determined by the club's ability to put chances away. Tottenham create so many chances. When the games come thick and fast, when the energy levels are low, you need to take those. Tottenham will need to put away the chances they are creating early in games. With the style of football that we play, it's physically very demanding, and won't want matches going all the way where the team has to keep pressing and working hard to get a 1-0 or nick a result. He'll want to cruise through games, and the best way to do that is by taking your chances early. Solanke will need to be ruthless in front of goal. Tottenham will create the chances for him, and he has to take them. So, strong words from Teddy, clearly very supportive of Dominic Solanke, thinks he's the right man that Spurs have got through the door. And obviously we noticed, didn't we, against Newcastle, how missing all of those chances cost us the game in the end. In fact, in reality, all we've seen of Solanke is probably about 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning of the Leicester game before he got that knock. He actually got that knock really early on into that game. So the chances he missed in the rest of that game were with an injury. So here's hoping that during this international break, Dominic Solanke has sat up, put his foot up, ice all over it, and just is resting and getting back to a position where he's 100% fit. Because as Teddy Sheringham says, and he really knows about scoring goals, we need Solanke fit. We need him firing. We need him as soon as possible in that North London derby, ideally. It's going to be a very difficult game. Chances at a premium. And when we make chances against Arsenal, we have to take them, because I have a fear that, like last year at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, they will hit us on the break if not. Let me know in the comments below what you think of Solanke. Is he the right man? Do you feel he will finish the chances given them, and will that start this weekend, this Sunday, in the big one? Okay, just some stats have been released by The Athletic this week, where they've discussed how Tottenham really should be doing better based on the stats from our first 3 game weeks this season. They pointed out that Tottenham took a massive 48 shots in their first 3 games. This is in keeping with what Sheringham was saying, actually, about Tottenham making chances and Solanke needing to be there to score them. 48 shots in the first 3 games is the second highest across the Premier League. We also have the second most shots on target, and with a joint second for shots from outside the penalty area. Now, that's a big change, isn't it? A lot of people in my comments box of my videos were saying, certainly last season, we need to be taking more shots from outside the area. Well, this season we have been doing that, but they haven't really been coming off quite yet. Obviously, there was Basuma's goal against Everton. That was a beauty. But I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think. Should we be taking as many shots from outside the box as we now are? Or would you prefer us to go back to kind of last season, where it felt like we were always trying to score that goal, getting to the byline and cutting it back? If you can imagine, a lot of the goals Richarlison scored, certainly in that run of, 10 in 11 games or 11 in 12 games, a lot of those were cutbacks from Brennan Johnson or from Timo Werner. Or do we need to find the compromise in between? Long shots when it's right and there aren't players blocking it, but also then getting it into the box when it's into the byline when it is a deep block. The Athletic go on. The outlet points of the quality of chances that Tottenham created at St James's Park against Newcastle were quite low, with Ange Postecoglou's men only registering an expected goals level of 1.3, with the average expected goals value of each shot being just 0.06. That's for the data lovers amongst you. This is because 11 of Tottenham's 20 goal attempts came from outside the box in that game. So for those of you among my audience who do love a bit of data wrangling and love the stats side of things, let me know what you think that really means for this season for Spurs. Has there been a real change of strategy to have more shots from distance? And if so, is that looking like a mistake at the moment? I think realistically, against a team like Newcastle and how they played against us, they were really sat deep, and therefore a lot of the shots that we did have, there were a lot of bodies for the ball to get through, which I'm sure makes it far less likely to get those shots on target. I remember one, obviously, when Sonny was breaking through, and he should have laid Brennan Johnson in on the right. I've mentioned it a few times on these videos. But he took a shot and had it blocked, I think, by Dan Burn instead of laying it to Johnson, who then I think could have laid it across the front of the box for an easy tap in. So I'm not sure if it's necessarily, personally, I'm not sure it's necessarily about a change of strategy, but it's just that the decision making so far this season hasn't been great. That's all I'd say, and I'm really hopeful that against Arsenal we can improve on that. Although, of course, with a lot of our players away on the international break, there won't have been a huge amount of time to really work on the training ground. But the Spurs players know how they want, how Big Ange wants them to play. They know the style. They know the strategy. Let's get at Arsenal early. Let's get the fans up and behind us and hit them early. And let's get 3 points. And if we got 3 points against Arsenal on Sunday, I think it's fair to say the fans would be back behind Spurs having a really brilliant season. Okay, there was also a brilliant article in The Athletic about David Pleat this weekend. If you haven't read it, check it out on The Athletic. Really brilliant article. For any of you that don't know, David Pleat was our manager back in 1987, but he revealed in this article that actually, since watching Spurs' double winning side under Bill Nicholson back in the early 60s, he'd supported Tottenham from then. So he actually waited. When he was manager of Luton, he waited for a long time, despite getting offered loads of other First Division jobs. First Division was what the Premier League is now, back then. He got offered jobs from clubs like QPR and other top clubs at the time. He waited because he wanted to get that Spurs job, and he took it in 87. And he was responsible for a very famous 4-5-1 formation that Spurs played in that season, with Chris Waddle and Glenn Hoddle playing as part of the 5 in midfield. Glenn Hoddle getting an absolute free role. He had one of his best seasons. And Clive Allen playing as a lone striker, and he scored 49 goals, all competitions that season. One of the highest ever scoring seasons for a Tottenham player. But more importantly, in terms of this article, he then became, after he lost his job as manager in 87, he came back under Daniel Levy and as a scout. And actually, previous to that, under Alan Sugar's stewardship of the club, he was director of football as well, back in the day when George Graham was manager and Glenn Hoddle was manager as well. He was actually one of the first ever kind of directors of football, which is now called kind of sporting director in the Premier League. He was a kind of outlier at the time, and Tottenham had the mickey taken out of them quite a lot for having that structure in place at the time, but as we've seen now, it's what everybody does, and Alan Sugar actually started that with David Pleat. Anyway, David Pleat was asked about his time scouting for Spurs, and this is what he said, and there's some interesting stuff here about players that basically Daniel Levy refused to listen to David Pleat about, and maybe he should have, frankly. Anyway, he's best known, this is from the article, he's best known for finding Dele Alli at MK Dons, watching him from the age of 16 in League One. He still remembers the games, Stevenage, Bristol City, Coventry City, and taking Franco Baldini, who was our sporting director back then, to watch Dele play. Pleat then persuaded the club to pay £5 million to sign Dele Alli. When Dele was established in the Spurs first team, Pleat proudly handed a slightly nonplussed Dele a folder of all the reports he had written on him. Soon after finding Dele, Pleat found another brilliant 16-year-old playing for Coventry City's under-18s against QPR. The boy was James Maddison, and Pleat says he was so good that it was like he had eyes in the back of his head. Pleat smiled. He bumped into Harry Redknapp at half-time, who said exactly the same thing. I went into Tottenham the following morning and said, there's a boy at Coventry we should sign tomorrow. It was an open goal. A tortoise couldn't have gone slower. They didn't chase it, meaning Daniel Levy and the club. When Maddison signed for Spurs last year, Pleat joked with him that he was £40 million too late. Yeah, that shows. He says a tortoise couldn't have gone slower, meaning how the club reacted to him saying, they've got to take this boy, James Maddison. And yeah, £40 million down the drain. Could have taken him early. But you could argue, couldn't you? And let me know what you think about this in the comments. You could argue that at kind of 16, 17 years old, Spurs knew that James Maddison wasn't going to get in the first team anytime soon. So it was actually more like it was a mistake of strategy of the club. They weren't buying players in from other clubs to then put in their academy to make sure that they'd come through at the time. But I think Spurs are better at that now. Pleat goes on, or the Athletic article, goes on. Some players never ended up at Spurs at all. Pleat says that he advised Tottenham to sign Jarrod Bowen for £8 million from Hull City, Ivan Toney for a similar price, and Ollie Watkins when he was still a box-to-box midfielder at Exeter City. He warns big clubs not to think that the only players good enough for them cost £40 million from foreign leagues, and points to the fact that in the 1980s, Spurs signed Galvin from Goultown, Graham Roberts from Weymouth, and Gary Mabbutt from Bristol Rovers. All those players became huge players for Spurs, especially Graham Roberts and Gary Mabbutt, who became our captain and one of our longest serving ever players. So it's good advice from David Pleat, I think. Pleat still has a traditional view of the value of old-fashioned scouting in a fast-changing game. And even though he left Spurs this summer, he still loves the chase, hearing tips on who the best young players are, driving around to watch games, hoping to catch sight of the next big thing. Pleat says, the data people, they're intelligent boys from university who've done wonderful dissertations, he says, but they haven't been in a dressing room and smelled the liniment. They don't know that side of it. They're more intelligent than most football people, and they're very good at expressing themselves. They're looking at lung-busting runs, at intensity, at all sorts of data things. But in the end, someone has to go with their eyes and ears. Okay, so I thought that was a really fascinating article from The Athletic. Do go and check it out because there's a lot more there. But I thought fascinating about scouting and how Pleat sees that scouting has changed. And that really is kind of like old school football versus modern football, isn't it? It's all data now, but there are still the old boys, such as David Pleat, such as Harry Redknapp, you hear him talking about this, who talk about the eye test and needing to use the eye test too. And I agree, because also what data doesn't give you is about their personality, is it? It doesn't, does it? You need to see a player in the flesh to see what kind of bite they've got on the pitch. That's one thing actually that I love about Lucas Bergvall. I'm going to talk about a little bit in a second. You can tell that he's got a bit of bite about him, and the data's not really going to tell you that much. It might tell you how many fouls he gives away, but in terms of like 50-50 challenges, when he wins the ball, if they've got a little bit of bite about them, you know they're going to be fixed for the Premier League. It's going to work for them. And you can't have players like Brian Hill, I hate to say it, very talented player, who I'm sure on the data in terms of his stats when he was young at Sevilla, I'm sure it looked great. But when he came into the Premier League, just did not have the strength and the physicality for it. And that's what the eye test can bring you, amongst many other things. Anyway, talking about Lucas Bergvall, he's talked this week whilst on international duty with Sweden, where he got his second cap a few days ago. He talked about his Tottenham initiation. He says, "I sang ABBA's Dancing Queen. It was really, really bad. I was booed afterwards." So I think that's funny that his new teammates at Spurs booed him. That's how bad a singer he was. Some news from Footy Headline says that Spurs apparently are going to have a black away kit next season. From my recollection, we've had dark blue away kits, but we've never had a black one. Let me know what you think about that in the comments section below. Meanwhile, some other news from The Athletic. They said that there's been a perception internally at Spurs that when things aren't going so well or he's not being picked, Sergio Reguilon isn't the easiest of characters to deal with. The general view is that he needs to feel loved and important to really thrive, and the reality is that Spurs have long moved past him being an important player for them. They go on to say Sergio Reguilon played in the Champions League whilst on loan at Manchester United just last season, and he wants to return to playing at that level. However, there have been minimal developments on that front, and the clock is ticking on the transfer windows across Europe, which are still open for him to get a move. So, interesting about his personality. You wouldn't think that about Reguilon, really. He always seems, from everything I've seen on socials and on the pitch, such a smiley, happy guy. But I don't know. Maybe from that I was going to say maybe he's got maybe he's slightly misunderstood, or maybe he's a little bit above his station. Thinks he's better than he is. But then also, this could be just Spurs releasing leaks to try and find a way to get him out. But I don't know if that's really going to work, because if you're a club reading that, you're not going to think, oh, I'm going to take a chance on that player. Don't know. Let me know what you think about Reguilon. Of course, in his first year, 18 months, he looked like a great signing, but just dropped off a cliff and has not impressed Big Ange Postecoglou in terms of his ability to play that inverted fullback role. Some international news now. On Friday evening, Wales drew 0-0 against Turkey. Brennan Johnson played the full 90 minutes, had 48 touches, 8 touches in the opposition box, made 1 pass into the final third, had 2 shots, 1 blocked and 1 wide. Ben Davies also played the full 90, had 115 touches, made 6 passes into the final third, and completed the most passes in the game with 100. I did a watch-along for the England game on Saturday, and one of our Welsh viewers said that actually Ben Davies and Brennan Johnson were the best players on the park for Wales in their new start under Craig Bellamy. Apparently they played quite an exciting high-pressing game there. Meanwhile, Radu Dragusin played 90 minutes for Romania as they beat Kosovo 3-0 in the Nations League. He had a passing accuracy at 68%, which makes me think he probably had to play quite a few long-range passes. He had 52 touches in the game, made 9 clearances, won 50% of his duels on the ground, and 67% of his aerial duels, showing his strength in the air there. Destiny Udogie came off the bench for Italy in the 62nd minute of their game and provided an assist in the 74th minute for Raspadori's third goal in a 3-1 win against France. Very impressive for Italy, and great to see Udogie getting an assist there. Go and check it out if you haven't. Hopefully that'll bring him some more confidence as he gets his way back to full fitness after that injury at the back end of last season. Yves Bissouma scored Mali's goal as they battled out a 1-1 home draw with Mozambique in the AFCON qualifying. And also, it was Yves' first international goal since 2017. So hopefully that'll lead to some more confidence for Yves Bissouma as well. And just a little bit of transfer talk before I end the Spurs section of this. Canadian striker Jonathan David, who's been on Spurs' list as well as Chelsea's list back in the summer, he said he held talks with a couple of teams this summer but chose to stay at Lille. He's 24 years old and he says he's now discussing extending his contract beyond next summer. Quite a few of you in the comments liked the look of Jonathan David and wanted Spurs to go for him. Are you disappointed that we didn't? Let me know in the comments below. Do you think he would have done better than Dominic Solanke this season? I think we could have got him for a bit cheaper, that's for sure, because his contract, of course, was running down. But I'm happy with Solanke. I think I love the look of his hold-up play in that first game against Leicester, and I think he will score goals this season. Okay. Before I go on to the more wide-ranging Premier League news and news from across the world of football, please, guys, if you haven't already, do press that like button. The more likes we get, the more people get to view this video. And also, if you're not a subscriber already, please do press that subscribe button for daily content across the Premier League and about Spurs as well, my beloved Tottenham. And also, you can become a member. Just £1 a month really helps me. Thank you to all of my members. How to become a member is available in the description box below. Let's get to Manchester United, though. They've reportedly made an approach for 21-year-old Sevilla winger Juan Luis Sanchez, but they face competition from Real Madrid, which frankly, as far as I'm concerned, means they are not going to get him, because Real Madrid will get anyone above Man United because United are in such a bad place at the moment. Meanwhile, they are still apparently in for Adrien Rabiot alongside Newcastle United. 29 years old, available on a free after leaving Juventus this summer. I'm sure he is just looking for huge money, Rabiot. Like I've said before, technically an incredibly gifted player, very talented, but I'm not sure about him personality-wise. And Man United, under Jim Ratcliffe, under Ineos, Sir Dave Brailsford, they said this summer when they came in, they said, we will not be buying players with big egos on the biggest salaries anymore. And yet, they just got De Ligt in, who caused trouble over at Bayern Munich, and they're looking at Rabiot. And just shows nothing seems to be changing at Old Trafford. And that is why they are not going to improve. Meanwhile, over at Man City, Bayern Munich forward Jamal Musiala, who's admired by them, has not ruled out a move to the Premier League. His deal runs out in 2026. Man City also apparently reportedly set to hand Pep Guardiola a £100 million transfer budget in January to help bolster his attacking options. They didn't really replace Alvarez, did they? So maybe that's why they're going to give him a little bit of a transfer budget. Meanwhile, City striker Erling Haaland, now 24, he's close to agreeing a new contract there apparently, which will make him their highest paid player. However, that new deal is expected to contain a release clause, which will be within reach for Real Madrid if they want to sign him in the future. I do think Haaland will want to go and try and score as many goals as possible in other leagues as well. It'd be interesting to see if he ever signed for Real Madrid while they have Kylian Mbappe. My God. They're rebuilding the Galacticos there, and if they had those two players together, that would be frightening. And obviously with Vinicius Jr. as well, and Rodrigo. My God, Real Madrid. Just building an incredible squad. Over to Liverpool, Virgil van Dijk's contract runs out next summer, as we know, and he says he wants to sign a new deal to stay at the club. He's 33 years old now, and he wants to stay till after the 2026 World Cup. I've kind of been assuming that maybe he'd get a big move elsewhere after this season, but maybe he'll sign a new deal. I'm sure Liverpool won't want to sign him on too long a contract, though, at the age of 33. Meanwhile, Mohamed Salah is interested in Paris Saint-Germain and Juventus. He's 32 now, and as well is out of contract next summer. Over to Newcastle, Kieran Trippier is pushing to leave them, as I've talked about quite a lot this month, amid interest from Jose Mourinho's Fenerbahce and Besiktas in Turkey as well. I could really see Kieran Trippier going over to play with Jose Mourinho. That would be an interesting one. I think he wants one more big deal, Trippier, because he's 33 now, just wants a bit more money in the bank. Meanwhile, Newcastle could revisit a deal for Nottingham Forest Sweden forward Anthony Elanga in January, apparently. Over to Chelsea, Enzo Maresca, their manager, has talked about how happy he is to have Jadon Sancho through the door. He said, "I'm very happy to have Sancho at Chelsea. He's here because we like that kind of player who can help in 1-versus-1s. He's key, especially against a low block. We need him." Chelsea have about 600 wide forwards. They did, of course, let Raheem Sterling leave to Arsenal on deadline day. So I guess in reality, Sancho just replaces him. But it'll be interesting to see whether Sancho even gets a place in the changing room. They've got so many players there. Talking about that, Todd Bley believes that his relationship with Clearlake, which is the investment company that bought the club, and Todd Bley was the face of that, he believes that his relationship with them is at breaking point. The situation is said to be untenable, and the co-owners want to buy each other out. Chelsea are on the brink of civil war, and I, for one, everybody, am here for it. You cannot come in and just think you're going to buy your way to success. And egos are involved, and they are falling out. And my cousins are all Chelsea fans, and they're embarrassed. They are embarrassed that they don't really know who's running the club. They don't know who's making the decisions. They're embarrassed that when Todd Bley came in, he appointed himself as sporting director and made so many terrible decisions. They barely know how to pronounce a number of players in the team they support squad. That is how embarrassing it is at Chelsea at the moment. And once again, I will say, be careful what you wish for, because a lot of Tottenham fans wish that we had a sugar daddy who could come in and just spend billions of pounds. And look at Chelsea. They've spent over £1 billion. And what have they got for it? Just everybody laughing at them. I don't know. Maybe Jadon Sancho will rip it up for Chelsea. Who knows? And I'm sure they'll get some good results here and there. But I think it's a laughing stock. I think they should have kept Mauricio Pochettino. I think he was putting plans in place there. But they clearly weren't willing to give him the control that he needed as a manager. And now they've got in a yes man in Maresca. Will he last the season? Who knows? It's a bit of a joke. Meanwhile, over to South London, and Real Madrid apparently targeting a move for Arsenal and France central defender William Saliba. Now, that is something I would like to see happening, because I hate to say it, but but Saliba is a great player. It's hard to say. You don't like to appreciate players from that club, but he is a brilliant centre-back, and without him they would be significantly worse. And meanwhile, apparently Arsenal are unwilling to let Italian midfielder Jorginho leave the club, despite the fact that Galatasaray are reportedly interested in bringing him to the club this transfer window, because of course the transfer window in Turkey does not end yet. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching and listening. If you haven't already, do press that like button. Do subscribe if you're not a subscriber already. Daily content all about Premier League news and Tottenham Hotspur. And of course, you can listen on the podcast platforms too. Please do help me and go over to those podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Press subscribe or follow there. It really helps me as well. And then you can listen to these daily podcasts when you're running or driving or taking the kids to school or wherever you are. Really appreciate you watching and listening, guys. Have a great rest of your Monday. Cheers.